investigating complaints and concerns about the programme, and were evasive in their reporting to the media and covered up what they knew from their internal investigation.
Do you remember that interview, Amy?
Yeah, very well. I think the whole world sort of recalls it and has seen it since. And when we know what happened subsequent to that, it's just such a tragic tale. And frankly, it's utterly appalling, disgraceful behaviour from Britain's public broadcaster. It's and of course they looked into it themselves and just did a whitewash in their own inquiry. So I hope it really raises quite a serious question in the UK and across all media about thinking about their own standards of ethics. They have an incredible position of power and privilege, and with that comes responsibility to act with far more integrity than we've seen here.
Brief response, Dwayne?
A plug for Media Watch on Sunday morning. I think there's a powerful role to be played there in just keeping our journalists, inspired, but also kept into account.
Good on you. Dwayne Major, Amy Adams, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. I appreciate it. And thank you to Rob Kelly for producing the panel. I'm Wallace Chapman and I'm back 3:45 Monday.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, the princess, the phony bank accounts, the lies and deception, and the BBC cover-up. More than 25 years after Diana's tell-all interview, the ugly story behind the story is finally told. Benefit boosts will mean $20 extra a week to start with, so what difference will it actually make to those on the lowest incomes? Checkpoint investigates. A pricey stroll in the Waitakaris, flouting Kauri dieback rules costs one man big time. Is the ports of Auckland bracing for more health and safety charges? And the Canine that could turn out to be women's best friend, a spaniel that could smell cancer.
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon. I'm Marama Tipole. Research shows the number of New Zealanders likely to get a COVID vaccine is growing. The Health Ministry says its latest survey done last month shows 77% of people are likely to get the jab. That's up 8% from the March results. COVID-19 Recovery Minister Chris Hipkins says that will only get better.
It gives us good confidence for the second part of the year, or the latter part of the year, when we're really ramping up and we're trying to encourage as many people as possible to come forward. The fact that more people are now saying, yep, we're keen to get the vaccine, that's really encouraging.
Chris Hipkins says the biggest jump has been Pacific people, with 80% likely to get a jab, up from 60% last month. The General Manager of Ngāti Maru has welcomed the Stratford District Council's last gasp decision to adopt a Maori ward for the 2022 local government elections. Stratford, Marlborough and Rotorua councils all adopted a ward on the last day possible. 35 of New Zealand's 78 local authorities will now have Māori wards in 2022. Anaru Marshall says it's a massive day for Ngāti Maru.
A large portion of our tribal rohe is within the Stratford district, and so having a partnership with the district council at the table is only a positive thing for us.
Stratford Mayor Neil Volz says the impassioned deputations today and behind-the-scenes discussions with iwi had helped to allay the fears of the most reluctant councillors. After 11 consecutive nights of bombardment, the skies over Israel and Gaza have fallen silent following the implementation of a ceasefire. Egypt, which brokered the deal, is sending security delegations to Israel and Gaza to monitor the truce. Israel says its offensive has significantly degraded the capabilities of the militant groups Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Hamas has called the ceasefire a victory and has promised to reconstruct thousands of homes destroyed by Israeli airstrikes. More than 240 people have died, most of them in Gaza. The Chief Coroner says her inquiry into 6 deaths among people who had recently switched epilepsy drugs has identified several shortfalls in the system. Judge Deborah Marshall says, however, the evidence does not clearly link the deaths to Pharmac's decision to switch. Ruth Hill reports.
Some families and patient advocates were disappointed with the coroner's finding, calling it a cop-out and a wasted opportunity. In response to questions by RNZ, Judge Marshall has urged people to read her report in its entirety to understand the conclusions. She says the inquiry has revealed the need for better communication with patients, the benefits of establishing a national dispensing database, and the lack of a formal system to monitor therapeutic equivalence between different brands of drugs. Ko Ruthiltiene.
Fiji's Navy is coordinating a search for 5 crew members of a fishing boat who went overboard amid a reported violent incident. On Wednesday, the Navy started an aerial search after 6 people went missing from the Chinese-owned Fiji-flagged tuna longliner. A Royal New Zealand Air Force Orion joined the search. The fishing boat was located yesterday with 2 crew members still on board. One of the crew who went overboard was also found. A decision to withdraw a proposed youth justice bill is being labelled a win for democracy by the Children's Commissioner. The Oranga Tamariki Youth Justice Demerits Points Amendment Bill sought to reduce repeat reoffending through a demerit point system. It was introduced by New Zealand First MP Derek Bull before being picked up by National MP Mark Mitchell, who requested its withdrawal today. Judge Andrew Beecroft says the bill would have made young offenders into the adult court system and onto prison. It's 5:04. The All Blacks will play 5 home tests in the Rugby Championship and an extra Bledisloe Cup with the competition schedule unveiled today. The Rugby Championship will include all 4 nations, New Zealand, Australia, Argentina and South Africa, after the world champion Springboks missed last year's tournament due to COVID-19. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
The first Bledisloe Cup test against the Wallabies will be played at Eden Park on August the 7th. The second Bledisloe and first Rugby Championship test will be in Perth 2 weeks later, with the third Bledisloe a week after that in Wellington. In September, the All Blacks will play 4 tests in a row with back-to-back matches against Argentina at Eden Park on the 11th, and a week after that they'll be in Wellington. The first of back-to-back matches against South Africa is in Dunedin on September the 25th. That will also be the 100th international between the two sides. The All Blacks and Springboks will also meet a week later in Auckland, wrapping up the Rugby Championship. Meanwhile, in Trans-Tasman Super Rugby tonight, the Hurricanes host the Melbourne Rebels and the Highlanders play the Western Force in Perth. This is Stephen Hewson.
The Warriors are hoping they'll still be able to play an NRL game in Auckland later this season. The club has decided to stay in Australia for the rest of the season to give the players and their families some stability in case the Trans-Tasman bubble is closed again. However, Chief Executive Cameron George says he's approached other clubs in the hope of getting 1 game in Auckland this year. The Warriors play West Tigers in Gosford tonight. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, the late Helen Kelly's biographer Rebecca McPhee on an extraordinary woman and the odds she faced. Astronomy Professor John Hearnshaw on astrotourism in Aotearoa, and Dr. Jen Gunter tackles the snake oil sellers and grifters infesting the internet. Cork and Hillaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from mid-service to midnight Saturday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, isolated showers turning to rain later tomorrow. Waikato to Kapiti Coast, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Mostly cloudy with the odd shower about the coast. Gisborne to Wairarapa, fine today, partly cloudy with isolated showers spreading south tomorrow. Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, cloud developing this evening. Clearing tomorrow morning apart from Wellington and coastal Marlborough. Bulla and Westland, rain spreading north, clearing from the south this evening. Tomorrow becoming fine. Canterbury and Otago, rain in Otago, clearing to fine tonight. Low cloud about coastal Canterbury tomorrow. Fiordin and Southland, partly cloudy with a few showers about the coast. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a chance of evening showers but fine tomorrow. It's 5:07. You're listening to RNZ National.
Kia ora rā, marama. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā. Coming up, the government wants to restore dignity and hope with its benefit bump. So what will $20 more a week actually put on the table and in tummies? But first, the lies and the cover-up that's lasted more than 2.5 decades. Princess Diana's sons have slammed the BBC over a 1995 interview with their mother. saying it contributed to her paranoia. An inquiry has found journalist Martin Bashir was deceitful and used fake bank statements to obtain the world-exclusive interview, during which Diana famously said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." The report describes the BBC's own probe into the incident at the time as woefully ineffective and concludes the broadcaster covered up. Prince William says the interview should never be aired again.
It is my view that the deceitful way the interview was obtained substantially influenced what my mother said. The interview was a major contribution to making my parents' relationship worse and has since hurt countless others. It brings indescribable sadness to know that the BBC's failures contributed significantly to her fear, paranoia and isolation that I remember from those final years with her. But what saddens me most is that if the BBC had properly investigated the complaints and concerns first raised in 1995, my mother would have known that she had been deceived. She was failed not just by a rogue reporter, but by leaders at the BBC who looked the other way rather than asking the tough questions. It is my firm view that this Panorama programme holds no legitimacy and should never be aired again. It effectively established a false narrative which for over a quarter of a century has been commercialised by the BBC and others. This settled narrative now needs to be addressed by the BBC and anyone else who has written or intends to write about these events.
Prince William. Meanwhile, Harry, the Duke of Sussex, says the ripple effect of a culture of exploitation and unethical practices ultimately took her life. Royal correspondent Victoria Arbiter explains in more detail the findings of the investigation by retired Judge Lord Dyson.
There's been rumours for years about exactly how Martin Bashir managed to get Diana to talk as openly as she did, but Lord Dyson's findings were revealed and made public yesterday in the UK, and the crux of the matter really comes down to the fact that he employed someone to falsify bank statements, which suggested that members of Earl Spencer's staff and members of the royal household at Buckingham Palace were being paid by the tabloid press to spy on Diana and were receiving funds really to report back to the royal family or to the press as well, to spy on her. And really at that time, we have to think about the fact Diana was 34 years old. She was very vulnerable. She was feeling already at the mercy of the press, of the institution, of the public, pulled in every direction. And as Prince William said in his statement, it really fed her sense of fear, her paranoia, her isolation. And so really it's quite horrifying what was able to unfold, and that we're only finding out about it almost a few months shy of a quarter of a century later.
OK, so the 2 main players here, the BBC and Martin Bashir. Let's start with Martin. What's he said about this and what's happened to him?
Well, he hasn't apologised quite in the vein that you would think he might. You would expect anyone else to be in this position to be issuing grovelling apologies and desperately upset for the role that they played. He has expressed his deep regret and says he wishes he hadn't done it, but he's also tried to turn the story around and say really what we should be doing is praising Diana for speaking out as bravely as she did. So not quite the apology you would expect from someone that's really been caught with his finger in the pie. He has been let go from the BBC. He left a few days ago. They said it was due to health reasons. I think we can all read into that and assume that he was fired, and rightfully so. But the BBC has been called into question because there were concerns back in 1995 about how this Diana interview was obtained. Those concerns were ignored. They were covered up. People turned the other way. Martin Bashir left the network in around 2009. He worked for ITV for a while, worked in the US for a while. But the BBC took him on again in 2016, and that's why they're also being called into question that if there were concerns, why was he given such a prestigious job in 2016?
As you said there, the earlier investigations by the BBC have been found to be woefully inadequate by this most recent inquiry, and in fact the BBC covered up what had gone on. This was an interview that got them a lot of kudos, Victoria, and basically Martin Bashir's career is built on the foundations of this interview, isn't it? So what happens with all the accolades and potentially the money that they've all made off this?
You are absolutely right. And all the money that's since been made by other people that are feeding off this interview. There's a lot of guilty parties here, but all fed from this one nugget of false information that just rapidly escalated. The BBC have already said they're handing back all of the awards that they were given in response to this interview. But you are absolutely right. This interview was the scoop of the century. It propelled Martin Bashir to stratospheric heights. Diana was the interview everybody wanted, whether it was Oprah Winfrey, Barbara Walters, a whole host of well-respected interviewers across the UK. Martin Bashir landed it. It remains to be seen if he's going to give back any of the awards he received as a result. I think he's probably hoping if he buries his head in the sand, this whole story will go away. It's not going to go away for the foreseeable future, and the BBC, certainly it's a very dark period for them in their history.
So Prince William has come out saying that the interview should never be used again, never run again, because of the basis on which it was obtained. Any word as to what is going to happen with this and whether it's even possible to walk it back? It's all over the place. You know, you look on YouTube, it's there, you can find it. He doesn't want it to see the light of day again.
And you can understand why this is deeply distressing for Prince William. He gave an impressive speech about the findings. He was incredibly well versed and articulate in his speech, but you could see the rage bubbling below the surface. So you can understand why he would want this interview never to be seen again. It set a false narrative, as he called it. But at the same time, as you rightly point out, it's on the internet. There is no reining this back in. So sure, the BBC may agree to never play it again, but I don't think we can't stop policing the world's press. We certainly have found that we can't police the internet, although many of us wish we could. So there's no walking this interview back per se, but I think people are going to be very careful about how they use it in the future. So I'm sure, I'm speculating here, but I would imagine the producers of The Crown used a lot of the footage from this interview to feed their storylines. Now Prince William is saying that it created a false narrative. So what about all those books that transpired as a result? The magazine editorials, the interviews, the movies, the documentaries. So much came from this interview. It is a beast, and it's had 25 years of life. So I think you're right. It's going to be impossible to rein it back in, but certainly the BBC should agree to never air it again.
And the core thing here, Princess Diana, right? So we can never know exactly what, how events changed for her as a result of doing this interview. But clearly she distanced herself from people who she wrongfully thought were doing wrong by her. And her sons have pointed that out as well. It potentially had catastrophic knock-on effects for her personally, didn't it?
It absolutely did. And this, for me, is where the tragedy truly lies, because from what Martin Bashir told Diana, she lost her trust in all of the people that were closely associated to her, whether they were aides, members of her personal staff, friends, family, extended members of the royal family. The minute she lost that trust, it's very hard to regain trust, and that did set in motion a number of the choices that she made. And it was upon her divorce, losing her HRH, her mistrust of the people that were assigned to protect her, that she did away with all of her royal protection. Now, as you mentioned, who knows how things would have unfolded. There's been a lot of talk about the fact Diana wanted to do an interview anyway. Would she have said the things that she said without this nudge from Martin Bashir? Maybe not. But where, of course, it takes us to is that fateful night in Paris. She had done away with her royal protection officers. Had she not done away with them, there's no way she would have got in a car with a drunk driver, certainly one that was speeding without wearing a seatbelt. So when you start to connect the dots, you see just how devastating the consequences of this interview really were.
And Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, who has pursued this relentlessly, he is drawing those dots, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He said he draws a line perfectly between his first meeting with Martin Bashir, which quite eerily was on August 31st, 1995. That's when Martin Bashir presented his case about people potentially spying on Diana. That's when he showed him the falsified bank statements. That led Diana's brother to introduce Diana to Martin Bashir. But when we think about August 31st, 1995, that first meeting, exactly 2 years to the day, Diana died on August 31st, 1997. And I think Earl Spencer, experiencing the family devastation that he did, he's very well positioned to draw a line between those two events.
What of Harry, Victoria? Because obviously he's had tumultuous times recently with his family, deeply, deeply affected by the death of his mother. And now to have this come out now, have we heard from Harry?
Well, Harry did release a statement as well. Both William and Harry's statements came out at the same time. William definitely spoke more to the press's involvement and how the press should have been accountable and the role specifically that the BBC played. Harry drew on the fact that this had a ripple effect, the culture of exploitation and unethical practices, which he says ultimately took her life. Both statements were personal. You could feel the hurt in both of these statements. And I think, yes, this just further illustrates, I guess, just quite why Harry remains as devastated to this day. Grief is a different journey for everybody. Yes, we are 25 years on from a deeply traumatic interview that Diana gave, more than 25 years on. We're coming up on a whole slew of anniversaries of Diana. Her 60th birthday would have been this year. Next year marks the 25th anniversary of her book with Andrew Morton. All of this, when we start to see these details, you realise how deeply affected both William and Harry have been, not just by the loss of their mother, but by all of the factors that played into the loss of their mother. So you certainly hope that the conclusion of this investigation will give them some semblance of peace, but at the end of the day, it doesn't bring her back. So their grief is a journey that they will continue with undoubtedly for the rest of their lives.
Royal correspondent Victoria Arbiter there. It is 19 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Still to come on the programme, Ports of Auckland braces itself for more health and safety charges, and there's nerves in the cooks as they prepare for the second bubble flight to land. Can $20 restore hope and dignity? Yesterday's $3 billion plus boost to benefits is billed as the biggest in a generation, and the government hopes it will do exactly that. In July this year, main benefits will go up $20 a week, while students will be $25 a week better off from April next year. So what does that actually buy? More petrol, food on the table, a few hours running a heater? Shortly we'll hear from some students, but first our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen went shopping with Karen from Hastings, who's on the sickness benefit, to find out how far $20 can stretch.
It's the noisy sounds of a busy supermarket on a Friday afternoon. We're at Pack and Save Hastings with Karen.
Yeah, well, I'm on the sickness benefit because I can't work, and hubby's the wage earner.
She's got to save every cent to make sure she's feeding her husband and 4 children.
I really feel for other families out there who are struggling. My only advice to them would be to seek some kind of budget advice.
In yesterday's budget, the government announced an initial $20 boost to benefits from July the 1st. So what does Karen choose? We get to it. Karen gets her veggies at home, or for a koha at a place close by to home. So we skip that one. So we go to the milk. But we can't decide. Is it best to go with a 1, 2 or 3 litre?
We'll stick with this. They haven't got the one I really wanted, which was not unless I go for the 3 litre. Oh no, I'm going to swap it out. Let's go for the bigger milk.
Right.
Sorry.
It takes your time. This is what a supermarket shop's all about. Then it's a coffee. But we don't go for the cheapest. That special blend, you don't want to go with the value.
I could have gone this one. Mind you, there's nothing wrong with this one. The value, nothing wrong with it. It's just that my husband loves the special blend.
We run past and grab noodles and sugar, 2 loaves of white bread, a pack of 20 eggs, table spread and rice. Then we get to the self-checkout and put everything through. But we get to $20.90. So we get rid of the rice.
Cancel items. Confirm cancel. Item cancelled.
That gives us 60 cents to go. And we look around for something small, a treat.
It's a shame because 79 was the lowest in the chocolates and 99 cents these ones. Even the chewing gum's expensive. Even the cookie.
Whoa, cookie type cookies for 99 cents. That is a bargain.
Yeah, that is a bargain, but we're a bit short. How much are these things? Yep, I think the lollipops is the winner today.
Karen chooses a strawberry chupa chup for 45 cents. So we're done. Grand total of $19.86. I asked Karen how she thinks the day went.
I enjoyed today. It was fun, a lot of fun. And, you know, the good Lord's blessed us with a glorious day, so that was really extra nice.
She says even though she might have made a couple of changes, everything's good.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with what we came out with. Like I said, I could have swapped the sugar, I feel like the sugar out, maybe for a bigger packet, just to close that gap, at the end. But I'm happy with, what was it, $19.80 something.
In Hastings for Checkpoint, ko Tom Kitchenaho.
Meanwhile, reporter Louise Tenuth and camera operator Nick Monroe went to find out what students will spend their extra money on.
An extra $25 a week is being promised to students from April next year. Student living in Auckland is pricey, so any top-up to their bank accounts is being welcomed.
It'll help, but it's not going to make a massive difference. Like $25 won't allow me to come back into town.
Mostly food. Yeah, food. Yeah. Pay for my bus fare.
Do you think $25 would actually do much for students, extra a week?
Not really. No. Oh, okay, that's quite hard. I don't know. A lot of it goes towards like food, probably, like in like lunch, or like bus fare and stuff, yeah.
Stationery supplies. Well, every little bit counts, right?
Top up my hop card. $25. Yeah, probably top up my bus card.
Do you treat yourself at all?
No.
So we're here with John. He's a student living here in Auckland CBD. We're going to give him $25 and see just how far it gets him here at Countdown. He's a mature student who moved to Auckland from Dunedin to pursue a career in medicine. For him, an extra $25 in his back pocket will make a huge difference. As soon as he's in the door, it's straight to the cereal.
Where are the wheat bags? Okay, so wheat bix, excellent. Special, $6.50, poverty friendly.
A quick tally to keep on track before he moves on.
$6.50 times 2, so that's 13, so that leaves me money for some milk. So here is perfect because we have 3 litre value milk. So I have at $5.32, so I can buy 1 and I can buy 2 of my value milks.
Another tally and things are quickly adding up.
That's the 2 milks, that's $10.64, so we add that to the 13. So now we're at $23.64. I'm very happy with that. That will feed me for a bit longer.
His weekly living costs are kept purely for necessities, so this extra boost goes a long way.
So there's my rent, obviously phone bill, because you've got to have phone and data, really important these days. And I'd like to cut my hair, but I think I'll leave that for a while. I'm rocking the homeless look at the moment, but that's fine, that's okay. Razors, things like that, they're really expensive, but this will really help me because it just assists with the food. It just gives that little extra, and any little extra is well received.
At the end of the shop, he's hunting for a treat.
What can I get? I've only got $1 left. Oh, lucky me. Whittaker's Fruit and Nut, that'll be fantastic. Yes, thank you. That's $1.30. I'm 6 cents off $25. That's a real treat. I'm happy with that. That's great.
For now, he's living within his means, so some things are still out of reach.
Yeah, I think that's maybe like a graduation special.
For Checkpoint, Louise Tenuth.
Now, if you were listening to that on radio, we'll put Louise's video on our Facebook page. Homai o whakaaro. Really love to hear your thoughts on this one. You would have heard there the student bought 2 large Weet-Bix, 2 large milks. He had a few cents change, treated himself to a chocolate bar, and that was his $25 gone. How far do you think $25 goes towards that goal, the government's goal of restoring dignity and hope? Would love your feedback on this. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Ports of Auckland appears to be bracing itself for more health and safety charges following a workplace death last year. There have been 3 deaths linked to the port in recent years. The most recent, a stevedore who was killed while on an overnight shift last year. A report out this week shows the ports are awaiting charges around a Maritime New Zealand investigation into that death. It comes amid yesterday's news that the port's chief executive, Tony Gibson, is standing down after 10 years with the company. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Tau Henare has been one of the loudest voices calling for Tony Gibson to stand down from the ports over health and safety failings. But the Deputy Chair of Auckland Council's Independent Maori Statutory Board says Mr Gibson's resignation yesterday wasn't a time to celebrate.
Everybody was whooping, and I thought to myself, I don't really like it when people lose their jobs. It doesn't matter who they are. But what I dislike even more is the loss of life.
News of the resignation has prompted accusations of bullying from Auckland Chamber of Commerce leader Michael Barnett. He vowed to wear a pink shirt today for Mr Gibson after he said political and union bullying pushed him out. Tau Henare says there's been nothing of the sort.
Oh, what a silly thing to do. Maybe he should wear a high vis in support of the 3 people who have died, 2 workers and 1 from the public.
And it appears the ports may soon face more charges over one of those deaths. In its latest quarterly report to the Auckland Council, the port says Maritime New Zealand's investigation into the August death of stevedore Pala Amokalati is complete and the ports are awaiting charges. Amokalati died after a container fell on him during an overnight shift. The accident's being investigated by Maritime New Zealand rather than WorkSafe because it happened on a ship. The Maritime Union's Russell Main hopes the right people will be held to account.
CEOs, board members and chairpersons of those boards have to become accountable and responsible for the health and safety of workers that are under their control. And without this, it just seems we're on a merry-go-round where these terrible results for families and that happen, but nothing ever seems to come out of it.
Health and safety lawyer Grant Nicholson says it is possible.
It's also possible that Maritime might pursue charges against the chief executive or members of the board in terms of their personal failures and the inability seemingly to deliver good health and safety at the port. If that's the case, they'll be up for fines of, I think it's $300,000 and potentially imprisonment.
But it's highly unlikely that's what will happen, as it's too hard for regulators to push on with those charges.
What we tend to see is that individuals have, to date at least, only really been prosecuted in circumstances where you've got a small organisation and you've got a senior leadership figure who's effectively on the tools and actually involved in the work activity. That's not the case at somewhere like the port, where you have a board that are undertaking a pure governance role. I think it's quite difficult for a regulator to look behind the governance and actually identify a failure by those particular individuals.
Last year, the ports was fined more than $500,000 over the death of a stevedore in 2018, which a judge described as entirely preventable. Russell Main says the unions want to see stronger health and safety laws in New Zealand.
What we want is the legislation that is now in Western Australia, and I think it may be in Queensland, which is corporate manslaughter. We want that legislation urgently introduced into New Zealand so that there is accountability and responsibility.
Mr Main says going forward, the Maritime Union will work constructively with new management at the ports to ensure a safe workplace. Maritime New Zealand said it had not completed its investigation into the latest death at the ports of Auckland. The Ports of Auckland has declined all requests for comment. For Checkpoint, Nita Blake-Person.
Kia ora, e te iwi e haere ake nei a Checkpoint, the dog that could save women's lives if there's enough money to finish its training. There's a few nerves in the Cook Islands with the second flight of the travel bubble due tomorrow, and we've got a little update for you on Scruff and Floss. You may remember the 2 AWOL terriers that sparked a land and air search. Ho mai o whakaaro, we'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program this evening. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is time now, though, for the headline headlines with Marama.
Talofa lava. About 80% of Pacific people say they're happy to get their COVID-19 vaccinations, up from just 60% last month. The COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says that's a pleasing development, with acceptance of the jabs across the population increasing each month. The Ministry of Health says around 77% of people are likely to get their jab. Chris Hipkins says the trend gives the government greater confidence as they ramp up the vaccinations rollout. The Chief Coroner says there's a need for better communication with patients following an inquiry into 6 deaths among people who had recently switched epilepsy drugs. Judge Deborah Marshall says there are also benefits to establishing a national dispensing database. The inquiry has found the evidence does not clearly link the deaths to Pharmac's decision to switch brands. Almost half of the country's city, regional and district councils will have Maori wards at next year's local body elections. Stratford, Marlborough and Rotorua councils have all adopted a ward on the last day possible, following several other local bodies that voted this week to include Maori seats. 35 of New Zealand's 78 local authorities will now have Maori wards in 2022. Both Israel and Hamas militants in Gaza are claiming victory after a ceasefire has ended 11 consecutive nights of hostilities that killed more than 240 people. The deal was brokered by Egypt, which is sending delegations to monitor the truce. Israel says it has significantly degraded the capabilities of Hamas. The militant group has promised to reconstruct thousands of homes destroyed by Israeli airstrikes. And 2 more men have been arrested in relation to a firearms incident at an Auckland hotel last month. Police searched 2 North Shore properties this morning and arrested a 24-year-old Mongols gang associate and a 31-year-old man. Both appeared in court today on drugs charges. Those are your headlines. More news at 6.
Thanks, Marama. And no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint. If you're just joining us, it is time for business now. Lots going on today. Nona Peltier's joined me in the studio. Okay, let's start with the number of companies reporting their financial results today. You got some highlights for us, or are they lowlights?
No, a bit of a lowlights, actually. But there's 5 of them I'll touch on. 2 of them are retirement village operators. One is Ryman, which is the largest. It had a pretty good result, but it was a bit disappointing because, of course, it had costs that hit its underlying profit, and that caused the share price to fall a little bit, 3.5%. Oceania Healthcare was another one. It had similar issues, so costs associated with COVID dragged down its result a little bit, and it dropped 1.5% today. Those were the retirement village operators. And then we had Metro Performance Glass, which is a company that manufactures glass for the market and construction and so on. Same story, hit by COVID. However, they had a much better result and the market liked that. And so it rose, 5%, which is pretty darn good for this market, considering the others had a pretty sour day. Now, My Food Bag was another. It's now a lot of people are familiar with that, but they may not know that the company listed on the NZX earlier this year at an issue price of $1.85. Well, today it was $1.43. So it was a result that delivered on its promise. So the company said, this is what we're going to make, and they delivered, and they're planning to deliver also for the next financial year. But the market was still unhappy with that. And finally, we had Sanford, which is a fishing company. Yeah, and it was down also 1%. Again, COVID hit its business because, of course, restaurants and so forth. And that's not just a New Zealand story for them. They're an export company. So the mussel catch was also down, but the wild salmon, it was all right. So that's your 5 companies in 90 seconds.
Well done, Nona. Okay, let's talk about the Warehouse Group now. They're in a trading halt. What's going on?
Well, now this is a saga, but I'll also keep it brief. Well, it started about 2005 when Foodstuffs, which operates the New World Pack and Saves and so on. Yes, that's right. They took a stake in the warehouse thinking maybe they could, maybe merge it. Who knew? This was in 2005. And they paid $150 million in those days for that stake. They owned 9% and they bought it with some associates. Now, that caused their competitor, which is now Woolworths owns the Countdown, to also take a stake. And they paid about the same amount, but bailed a long time ago and thought this isn't going to work out for us because the Commerce Commission nixed that idea completely. So now Foodstuffs, 16 years on, has decided finally to sell that stake. So they've put the company into a trading halt so that they can have an orderly exit. But, you know, they're guaranteed about $100 million because the deal's underwritten. At the moment, though, those shares are worth $114 million. So they've definitely lost some money as well. And speaking of these supermarkets, just to remind our listeners that the Commerce Commission is investigating both Countdown Woolworths business and the Foodstuffs New Worlds to see whether or not they're anti-competitive.
Right, and what else do you bring us from the markets and the general whip around, Nona?
That's right. Okay, so overall, our market was little changed, and that you would expect considering those down results. We rose 22 points. That's a 0.2% increase to 12,460. And of course, in Asia, the markets are stronger as well, so that's good news for the region. The New Zealand dollar, steady, 71.9 US cents, 92.6 Australian, and 50.7 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with the whirlwind that is business today. The Labour government has signalled its future budgets will have more support for workers as the opposition attacks it for ignoring middle New Zealand. Yesterday's budget contained a $3.3 billion boost to benefits over 4 years, but little in the way of direct assistance for workers or business. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The signs of last night's post-budget bash were apparent this morning. Labour MPs feeling a little worse for wear in the debating chamber.
Sorry, Mr Speaker, I must have been a little bit asleep. It's been a long few days. I don't need Barocca, I can assure you of that. I'd just like to crack on and get through the day, so I commend this bill to the House.
Not helping the headaches, the relentless attacks from across the House. The opposition targeting not so much what was in the budget, but what wasn't.
No boost for business. There wasn't a thing in it for working New Zealanders.
Nothing to business and middle New Zealanders.
We got a budget that looked down, not up.
International's Judith Collins took her message straight to the afflicted today, taking the stage at a Business New Zealand post-budget lunch.
We were hoping for aspiration and ambition, and we didn't get it.
The only problem, her audience was less critical of the budget than she was. Business New Zealand's Chief Executive Kirk Hope agrees the economy needed more attention, but he applauds the social spending.
It's very hard to be critical of greater support for those communities most in need. I mean, we're perfectly fine actually with the benefit increase and agree possibly it could have been more.
That's a good thing. I think New Zealanders are empathetic and compassionate people, and it's another reason why I'm pleased we made the changes yesterday.
Grant Robertson is unapologetic about his budget's focus on the bottom end, but pushes back against claims he's ignored business and workers. He says don't forget the massive amount of money pumped into the economy through last year's wage subsidies. As for the working poor, there's a promise of more to come. Officials are currently looking at ways to improve working for families.
I did say yesterday you need to think about the three budgets together, and so we've obviously got two more to come.
We know that that's probably the next best vehicle to address child poverty.
Jacinda Ardern says the government intends to complete that review this term. That means working families could still be in for a sweetener, perhaps right in time for the next election. Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch aho.
Quiet has fallen over the skies of the Middle East. A ceasefire between Israel and Hamas began at 11 a.m. New Zealand time, and for now it appears to be holding. The US and Britain have welcomed the unconditional ceasefire and are hopeful it marks the start of peaceful negotiations between the warring sides. It comes after 11 days of bloody combat, which caused hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. The BBC's Courtney Bembridge reports.
There were celebrations on the streets of Gaza City after the ceasefire came into effect in the early hours of the morning. It brings to an end 11 days of bombardment, in which more than 240 people have died, mostly in Gaza. Hamas is the militant group that rules there, and this was its reaction to the truce.
I say that today this battle stops, but Netanyahu and the whole world should know that our hands are on the trigger, and we will continue to ramp up the capabilities of this resistance. And we will tell Netanyahu and his army, if you come back, we will come back.
The office of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the ceasefire was mutual and unconditional, but some Israelis in Tel Aviv were doubtful about how long it will last.
The ceasefire is good for humanitarian reasons, to let civilians relax a little bit on both sides. I'm skeptical, though, that it will really be kept for a while. I don't think Israel has achieved much. I mean, there are no agreements about the future, nothing.
This ceasefire won't last 8 hours. They will start shooting gas rockets again.
The US President Joe Biden welcomed the ceasefire, which was brokered by Egypt.
We've held intensive high-level discussions, hour by hour, literally. Egypt, the Palestinian Authority, and other Middle Eastern countries, with the aim of avoiding the sort of prolonged conflict we've seen in previous years when the hostilities have broken out.
Cairo is sending 2 delegations to monitor the situation as the world's attention now turns to maintaining peace. This was the message from the United Nations.
I stress that Israeli and Palestinian leaders have a responsibility beyond the restoration of calm to start a serious dialogue to address the root causes of the conflict.
The latest conflict is the 4th big war between Israel and Hamas since 2008. And many fear it won't be the last.
The reality at this point is the gaps between the Israelis and the Palestinians on this conflict and how to resolve it are extremely wide, both substantively, psychologically, and I would say politically.
For now, though, both sides are claiming a victory.
It is 16 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He Muriaki in Pita Pita Kōrero after the news at 6, the $6,000 walk in the Waitakere Ranges. Tourism businesses in the Cook Islands may be crying out for more Kiwi holidaymakers, but the sentiment isn't shared by all. Some Rarotongans are anxious about COVID creeping into the Cooks, while others say they don't feel supported by visiting Kiwis. Nonetheless, things are gearing up in the Cooks for the arrival of the second bubble flight tomorrow. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nate McKinnon.
Day 5 of the Cook Islands travel bubble, and Timu Narima George is preparing for an onslaught.
I'm making a headache for a beautiful young woman to wear tonight to the dance or to a family get-together.
Known as Papa G, he's operated Hut 24 at Punana Nui Market for over a decade. But for the last year, he's relied on local support. That's about to change with up to another 300 Kiwis ready to touch down in Rarotonga tomorrow, the second flight of this new bubble. Punana Nui Market is the main market in Rarotonga, and Saturday is its big reopening. It's been a long time coming. The manager of this market says over 70% of stalls that would usually be here have disappeared because of COVID-19. So you'd be forgiven for assuming the locals manning these stalls are itching for tourists to return. But many here, Papa G included, are actually on the fence.
It's good for tourists to come back, and it's also good for us to wake us up, not just to rely on tourism, but find ways and means, the product that we got here in the islands to be used. Because to be honest, the last 11 years that I've been here, a lot of tourists come, but most of them don't buy.
Checkpoint has told the stories of larger tourism businesses keen to see Kiwi visitors return in their droves. But here at Punana Nui Market, we're met with some alternative views. Clark Tangiura Turua, a local pastor, is hard at work laying out fresh bananas, coconuts, passion fruit and avocados.
Financially, we are relying totally on tourism. So we need them to come. But at the back of our mind, we are reluctant.
Why the reluctance? Well, there's still plenty of COVID-19 anxiety here in Rarotonga.
there are some question marks in their minds, in regarding to COVID-19, because we don't really see and know where this thing is. But people that are coming in will be carrying that very thing, but we don't know. That's why we are so concerned, and we are very reluctant. Some of the people are reluctant, but at the same time, we really need our business people to continue.
Mi'i Upu, Mrs. Q to her friends, is set up ready to sell her homemade seashell jewellery and arts and crafts.
It's been hard, struggling. It's a struggle here, but we managed to come through with it. But without the government subsidy, we wouldn't have made it.
But she too is worried the Cook Islands government has reopened the border too soon.
Yes, I think we should have had the jab first before tourists. But then, hey, from New Zealand, they should have had all the jab before coming down.
Just down from Mrs. Q's stall, Tere Moana Albert is showing off an assortment of coconuts. Green and yellow rokua bananas are also on offer.
Some people said this one will cure the cancer in you, but I don't really know.
Like everyone here, Mrs. Albert acknowledges the Cook Islands needs tourists. At the same time, she says there needs to be a shift in focus away from resorts with all the trimmings.
When I said to them, the drinking coconut is $4, $5, $3. Oh, it's too much money. And the bottle of whiskey is about $25 or $50. They can pay for it. This one is...
Despite locals' concerns and a clear dose of COVID anxiety, Punananui Market Manager William Tiripo says there are grand plans for a big reopening this Saturday.
During the COVID times, there were only the locals who coming to the market. Now we're trying to revive our culture, to bring in some dancing group, to bring up some entertainment or spot prizes like a gala day events and for the children. So the atmosphere will be the same as before COVID times.
Over the last year, Mr. Tiripo says just 25 to 30% of stall owners have bothered showing up on Saturdays.
Our customers over here at the market at that time or last year is mainly for essential services, things like food. But normally we have people for arts and crafts and other specialties over here, but they won't be coming back to the market because there's no tourism to buy their products.
And when the next plane load of Kiwi visitors does land in Rarotonga, the locals here have a message. Put down that pina colada. Leave your poolside perch.
To come and spend the money away at the market here, as the locals here, instead of going to the restaurant and all.
From the Cook Islands for Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
Imagine this, a dog that could be women's best friend by sniffing out the early signs of ovarian cancer. A medical charity is trying to raise $250,000 to train a Cocker Spaniel pup to do exactly that and believes it would be the first of its kind. Dogs have way more sensitive noses than humans and have been trained to sniff out other cancers, with detection rates in some cases over 99%. The Director of Canine Medical Detection, Pauline Blomfield, thinks they found the right pup for the job.
It really just depends on our funding as we go down the track, which career path he will take as to whether he will be added to our prostate cancer detection team or bowel cancer, or hopefully it could actually be the first ovarian cancer detection dog.
Right, so that's your big hope, that this puppy will be trained to detect ovarian cancer. Can you tell us a bit more about him? What kind of dog is he? What breed is he?
He is a Springer Spaniel and his name is Ace.
Okay, and so what does it take to train a dog to do this, and how much money is it going to take?
It's about $250,000 I have to raise per year per cancer in order to train the dogs. The dog is sort of just one section of it. The science behind it is absolutely massive. So we will start with having our cancer cells grown in the laboratory. So we make sure that all the training samples are pure. We know what we're working with. They've got great integrity. And we have a full scientific and clinical team to keep us on track.
What does cancer smell like, Pauline?
We don't know, but the dogs do. So the cancer cells, what happens is there's something called volatiles that are released from the cancer cells, and that's what the dogs are smelling. So you have to remember that the dog's olfactory abilities are about 40 times greater than that of humans. So you and I can't smell it, but the dogs can.
But even so, Pauline, these tumours are embedded deep in bodies sometimes.
Yes.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there has been cases where pet dogs have indicated on their owners, they've kept nudging them in certain places, and the person has finally said, well, actually, my dog thinks there's something wrong, I better go and see my GP. But what we're asking of our dogs is to be literally smelling hundreds of samples a day.
Okay, so how long would it take for this pup to get up to speed?
Well, depending on maturity, we could start odour work at about 10 months old. Right at the moment, the trainer's doing lots of work with him, and it's exciting work. It's fun for the puppy, They're helping them to build drive and just be prepared for when we do actually start on odour work.
So I'm picking that they're exposed to samples, so they get to know the smell, and then are they encouraged to detect those samples in a controlled situation?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the big thing for people to realise is that our dogs don't go out into the community sniffing people. That's always the big concern. So what we're really doing is we're developing a urine test for early cancer detection. And the thing to also remember is that our testing has to be robust and rigorous, and it has to meet the same sort of standards that you would expect if you go into the chemist to buy some cough medicine. That the testing that has been done before that gets to you is really, really robust, and we adhere to those same standards.
Pauline, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here, because this is what everyone's going to be listening to this is thinking, well, how does this work then? Yep. So, if you suspect someone has cancer, is the dog and the person anywhere near each other, or are they just smelling samples of that person's pee?
They're just smelling samples of that person's pee, yes, because urine is really easy and it's non-invasive. So the samples are sent to our training centre, and it's pretty much the same as if, you go to the centre and you have a blood sample. That is sent away to the laboratory. Well, basically the same sort of thing is happening to us. That will be sent to us.
So how does the dog react if it is cancer?
So the training that we have over a period of time, all our training is on positive reinforcement, so we know when we start the dog that we put out a cancer sample that we know is 100% positive, and the dog smells it and we go, yes, that's fantastic, and the positive reinforcement, they either get a play or they get a treat, and then we move up from there. All of the samples are out in individual stands, and the dog will just go along and sniff each one. Depending on the dog, we've got one dog that will sit as soon as they find a positive sample, and then the dog goes back to the trainer and is rewarded. We've got another one that just absolutely stands rock still and stares ahead and won't move. Just, I've found this positive sample and I won't move until I'm released. So the dogs are very, very clear when they do find a positive sample.
And what is the difference, or how do they tell the difference between sniffing for ovarian cancer? Because I know you've got medical dogs for colon cancer. How does the dog tell the difference?
So we will keep dogs separate for each cancer. So we have 2 dogs at the moment for bowel cancer and 2 dogs for prostate. And if we can raise the funds, then little Ace will be our ovarian cancer dog.
And do all those dogs sniff urine samples to detect the different forms of cancer?
So, yes, they have. We keep them separate, if that's what you mean. So
yes, but in terms of detection, so you keep the dogs separate, but each of those different dogs is specifically smelling a very specific form of cancer.
Yes, correct.
So specifically colon cancer, specifically prostate cancer, and you hope soon to have a dog that can sniff ovarian cancer.
Yes.
But they don't all sniff all cancers.
They certainly could. I mean, if you are putting cancer samples out there, we're not at the stage yet where we would be taking patient samples, but if a dog alerted on a particular sample, then that sample would go back to the laboratory, because they can generalise to say, well, look, you know, the odour from this may not be 100% what I've been trained for, but I can actually detect that there is something in there that I need to tell you about.
Do the different cancers smell different?
We don't know, but the dogs do.
This dog that you're hoping to train to detect ovarian cancer, will it work with specific group of women? Is it going to be in a particular geographic area, or are you aiming to help with screening of any particular group?
No. Again, it's part of the robust testing that we have to do. So what we do is we start off with what's called a proof of concept, and that literally shows and we prove that the dog can detect an odour. And then from there we go to what's called a diagnostic test accuracy, and that's where we compare our testing versus your patient care or the usual testing, and then we go on to what's called a randomised control trial. So there's so much work that actually goes into before we can even talk about screening or anything like that, again, because we have to have all the data. And what we do, and it's trying to keep it simple, but we have what we call sensitivity and specificity, and what that means is that one correctly identifies those with a disease, and then one correctly identifies those without a disease. Now, just to give you an idea, our bowel cancer detection dog, he's currently working at a 99.8% success rate. So we collect all the training data, it all goes through to our biostatistician, and then they come back with the results.
So people can be assured that this is grounded in science. It's not, you know, oh, the dog feels something's up.
Absolutely. That's the whole thing, is that what we keep saying to people, it is dogs and science working together.
And that's the Director of Canine Medical Detection, Pauline Blomfield. Let's get to some of your feedback now. This is on our story where we went to see what you could get for your $20 in the benefit boost that the government is promising this year. Remember, it's $20 this year, and there's going to be some increases next year. And they hope it's going to bring dignity and hope, is what Grant Robertson said in his speech. This person says, no, it won't bring that, but it can make things just a wee bit better. Another person says, it could be a big block of cheese, bag of cat biscuits, because I have animal dependence. Tony reckons $20 a week extra is an insult, and Jacinda's team has failed the lower socioeconomic people in spades. Woefully out of touch, says Tony. Better than nothing, someone else says. $20 will run a small heater for around 40 hours, this person says, so let's not scoff at the ability to keep a room warm for a week of evenings in winter. And Kylene, who is a student in Dunedin's, got in touch to say $25 a week will be worth nothing in a few years with rent increases. Disappointed at the continual expectation for students to get a job on top of studying to not live in poverty. And this person reckons $20 a week will just be sucked up by their landlord. And maybe contrary to what you think, they think that's a good idea because they'll get to stay where they are for longer.
Good evening, I'm Marama Tipole on RNZ National. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the government's found nothing to suggest the benefit increases announced in yesterday's budget will lead to rent increases. Beneficiaries will get up to $55 more in their pockets in a two-stage boost to income support payments. Ms Ardern says concerns have been raised that this could trigger rent hikes.
We went back through the evidence through the recent times we've had changes to the amount of assistance people receive, and we haven't seen a correlation that rents go up as a result.
Social agencies have welcomed the boost to benefits but say it's not enough to cover the rising cost of living. New Zealand On Air has apologised to a former staff member for failing to offer her adequate support after she was assaulted by an award-winning musician in 2017. Singer-songwriter Thomas Oliver has admitted grabbing a woman by the neck after a music awards show in 2017. In a statement to RNZ, a spokesperson for New Zealand On Air says management believed they were responding appropriately at the time, but now accept they should have done more to support her. She says the agency has offered the woman a sincere apology and now have clearer processes in place to respond to such incidents. In a social media post that's since been removed, Oliver says the incident prompted him to quit drinking. He says he's stepping away from music for the foreseeable future. The Mayor of Stratford says councils around the country who have adopted Maori wards still have work to do to convince everybody they're a good thing. Stratford joined Rotorua and Marlborough in adopting a Maori ward for the 2022 local body elections, the last possible day to do so. Neil Volsky says in many places where there'd been polls, Maori wards had been rejected.
In leadership roles, you have to exercise your best judgment, and that's not always supported by everyone in the community. Our task ahead of us is now to move that forward so that everybody buys into it.
Stratford had twice deferred adopting a Māori ward, but Mr Volsky says councillors had been convinced by local iwi leaders now was the right time to introduce one. 35 of New Zealand's 78 local bodies will now have Māori wards in place at the next local body elections. Samoa's parliament is to convene on Monday following the rejection of an appeal seeking to block the newcomer Fast Party from commanding a majority. It's expected that Samoa will then announce its first woman Prime Minister. Dominic Godfrey reports.
Samoa's Court of Appeal today rejected an attempt by the caretaker HRPP government to halt the voiding of a sixth women's seat. It confirmed that the Fast Party has a 26 to 25 majority. The head of state, Tui Maleali'ifano Va'alitoa Sualauvi II, then issued a writ declaring Samoa's 17th Parliament would convene at 9:30 Monday morning. It's expected the Fast Party leader, Fiame Naomi Mataafa, will then declare a majority government, making her Prime Minister. A final challenge regarding the extra women's seat is yet to be heard, as are electoral petitions which could still change the face of government. O wa'u'o, Dominic Godfrey, Lene.
A man has been ordered to pay almost $6,000 after he was found guilty of flouting Kauri dieback rules at an Auckland regional park. Robert Armistead was sentenced today at the Waitakere District Court by Judge Lisa Tremuan. Local iwi Te Kaurawamaki delivered their victim impact statement to the court. Director Robin Taua Gordon said a rahui is not some quaint cultural activity without consequence, but a means to heal and make safe.
It is sad that some members of the public have such little respect for our environment, our people, and indeed future generations, that they would repeatedly breach the rahui. We only hope that some deep lessons are learnt from this unfortunate episode.
It's the first prosecution of its kind. The skies over Israel and Gaza have fallen silent following the implementation of the ceasefire agreed on Thursday. Egypt, which brokered the deal, is sending security delegations to Israel and Gaza to monitor the truce. Israel says its offensive has significantly degraded the capabilities of militant groups. The BBC's Paul Adams is in Jerusalem.
We understand that Egyptian officials will be arriving in Gaza and in Israel fairly soon to discuss the fine print. And clearly those negotiations will be important. But the bottom line is that the two sides have agreed to stop these exchanges that have been going on for 11 days. Of course, none of that addresses the fundamental underlying issues between Israel and the Palestinians. And unless those are addressed, it is a racing certainty that at some point in the future we will be here again.
It's 6:05. The All Blacks coach Ian Foster has welcomed the return of South Africa to the Rugby Championship. The world champion Springboks withdrew from last year's championship due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The first of the back-to-back games against South Africa in Dunedin on September 25th will mark the 100th test between the All Blacks and the Springboks.
The All Blacks South Africa test is special, and we really missed them last year. Yeah, and I know for the players there was a huge level of tension and excitement about it, so having them 2 weeks here would be pretty special.
The second test is in Auckland on October the 2nd. Meanwhile, in Trans-Tasman Super Rugby tonight, the Hurricanes host the Melbourne Rebels and the Highlanders play the Western Force in Perth. Experienced Black Caps bowler Tim Southee wants to emulate England counterpart Jimmy Anderson and continue to play into his late 30s. Anderson remains a mainstay of the English bowling attack 2 months shy of his 39th birthday. Southee is now 32, but says he still loves the game.
It's great to see guys like Jimmy at 38 still being able to bowl as well as he possibly can. So it's an absolute dream to play for your country, and I'd love to do it for hopefully many more years to come.
Tim Southee says cricketers look after themselves better than in the past, so he expects current players will be able to play for longer. And the Wellington Phoenix head coach, Ufuk Talay, has extended his contract for 2 more seasons with the A-League Football Club. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life goes to Flea Bay on Banks Peninsula for a penguin-friendly farming experience. And probably not a flea circus. British writer and dub poet Benjamin Zephaniah presents a special program marking the 40th anniversary of the death of Bob Marley. And because aviators Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart both crossed the Atlantic on this day, we've got a Sonic Tonic dedicated to flying. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, it's after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel isolated showers turning to rain later tomorrow. Waikato to Kapiti Coast including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Expect the odd shower about the coast. Gisborne to Wairarapa, isolated showers spreading south tomorrow. Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, cloud developing this evening. Clearing tomorrow morning apart from Wellington and coastal Marlborough. Bulla and Westland, rain clearing from the south this evening. Tomorrow becoming fine. Canterbury and Otago, rain in Otago, clearing to fine tonight. Low cloud about coastal Canterbury tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland, partly cloudy with a few showers about the coast. And the Chatham Islands, a chance of evening shower, fine tomorrow. It's 8 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā, marama. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The boost to benefits was the centrepiece of yesterday's budget, but questions are already being asked about whether it's enough to keep pace with the rising cost of living. Beneficiaries will get up to $55 more in their pockets each week once the increases are fully implemented next April. The government says thousands of children will be lifted out of poverty, but those on the front lines say more action will be needed to keep making progress. Here's our social issues reporter, Sarah Robson.
Good morning. Nice to meet you.
The day after the budget, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern visiting Wellington City Mission's social supermarket with Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni.
We have people come in, there's 2 people every half an hour, families, and they come in and do their shop. And we know who they are, we know how many points they get given to come and spend at the supermarket.
An alternative to simply handing out food parcels, the social supermarket allocates people points depending on how many people they're feeding. They then use those points to choose the food they want from the shelves.
What are the top products that you're selling?
UHT was the very top.
Which was it?
UHT and funny chickpeas. Chickpeas was right up in the top 20. Yeah. Potatoes. Yeah, so did we. Versatile.
Wellington City Missioner Murray Edridge says demand for food soared during last year's lockdown.
Obviously, over time, that's settled down, but it settled down at a level still higher than it was pre-COVID. And my anxiety is about the number of families that are just surviving.
He says yesterday's boost to benefits will give families a bit more of a buffer.
I mean, another $20 a week from July and then more next year is going to make a difference without question. Is it enough? No, I think in terms of dignity, we still need to keep pushing.
But Murray Edridge says it's rising rents that's putting pressure on families.
When you have the cost of housing being as excessive as they are, then there just isn't enough money left to pay for food. So we're seeing the impact of other effects manifest themselves in a food demand.
We are trying to make sure that no matter what is placing pressure on a family, that we're trying to put those supports in place.
And Jacinda Ardern says the government's found nothing to suggest benefit increases will lead to rent increases.
People have raised the question, will these increases in main benefits go directly to rent increases or cause rents to go up? We went back through the evidence through the recent times we've had changes to the amount of assistance people receive, and we haven't seen a correlation that rents go up as a result.
The government says the benefit changes announced yesterday could lift up to 33,000 children out of poverty on the after housing costs measure. But Treasury can't predict what impact it will have on rates of material hardship, whether families can afford things like healthy food, visits to the doctor and new shoes. The Children's Commissioner, Andrew Beecroft, says it's a dire situation.
We have 2 Eden Parks full worth of spectators of children who qualify as living in material hardship. 1 in 4 Pacifica children report living in families where food sometimes or often runs out.
The Child Poverty Report in this year's budget has warned child poverty rates could flatline or even start increasing if there is no further investment. Atu i te whare paremata, mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
They left it until the very last day possible, but Marlborough, Rotorua and Stratford district councils have become the latest to approve the formation of a Maori ward in time for the 2022 elections. When ratepayers next go to the polls, 35 of the nation's 78 local authorities will now have Maori wards. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin was in Stratford.
The vote was 11-0, the motion is carried unanimously.
The unanimous vote to establish a Maori ward in Stratford was met by an outpouring of song and emotion from a packed public gallery at an emergency meeting today. The council had voted twice previously to defer a decision on a Maori ward, saying there wasn't enough time to consult. Chief Advisor to Ngāti Ruanui, Graham Young, welcomed the vote.
Today is a courageous decision made by the Stratford District Council. It's extremely important to Ngāti Ruanui because it places us at the decision-making table or having representation at this decision-making table, which is like every other council's achieved throughout this region. Stratford is the last, but they finally made the right decision to get there.
He says iwi helped council get around its consultation sticking point.
We brought the consultation to them. They weren't able to do that, so we came to them, we met, we've achieved a fantastic outcome.
General Manager of Ngāti Maru, Anaru Marshall, says the decision is massive for the iwi.
A large portion of our tribal rohe is within the Stratford district, and so we have a lot of interests in this area, and so having a partnership with the district council at the table is just only a positive thing for us.
The Mayor, Neil Vodsky, says the district's 7 iwi helped reluctant councillors see the upside.
I think the change has been brought about by the engagement that we've had with our local iwi. They made some very powerful contribution to our discussions, and I think probably for a lot of us we feel a lot more enlightened than we were perhaps a week ago.
In Marlborough, a Maori ward was voted in with just one dissenting voice. Mayor John Leggett says it's a significant move towards better representation.
We see it as enhancing local government, enhancing our ability to make good decisions for our community. And look, really, when you break it down, that's what we're there for. We're there to represent our community, and our decision-making should reflect our community. It's as simple as that.
He'd like to see councils still without a Maori ward adopt them. Trustee of Te Runanga Arangatane o Wairau, Dr. Peter Meihana, says it's been a momentous day.
Māori wards are a way of getting Māori into those decision-making processes. It's not about separatism at all. It's about coming together and making joint decisions. There's some education to take place, but I'm confident that this decision is going to be good for the entire community, not just Māori.
Peter Meihana says Maori wards are about inclusivity and opportunity. But Stratford Mayor Neil Volsky echoed his view that more education would be required to bring the naysayers along for the ride.
In many places around the country, when there's been polls, the population at large has voted against this. But sometimes in leadership roles, you have to exercise your best judgment, and that's not always supported by everyone in the community. Our task ahead of us is now to move that forward so that everybody buys into it.
Councils who've opted for a Māori ward now have to undertake a representation review and consult with the public on an initial recommendation by August 2021. The number of Māori ward positions will be calculated proportionally based on the total number of councillors for the district or region and the number of people enrolled on the Māori electoral roll for that area. I Taranaki, mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi pōnei, ko Robin Martin Aho.
And it is 16 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A man has been ordered to pay almost $6,000 after he was found guilty of flouting Kauri dieback rules at an Auckland regional park. Robert Armistead was sentenced today at the Waitakere District Court by Judge Lisa Tremewen. Reporter Kate Gregan was there.
It is the first prosecution of its kind. In March, Robert Armistead was found guilty of breaching Auckland Council's public safety and nuisance bylaw. Today, the West Auckland man was sentenced for entering tracks in the Waitakere Ranges that had been closed to prevent the spread of the tree-killing disease. He was caught several times on camera in 2019, entering closed walkways in Te Tarangi, but he argued that the area he was in was not parkland. Local iwi Te Kauro delivered their victim impact statement to the court. Director Robin Toa Gordon said a rāhui is not some quaint cultural activity without consequence, but a means to heal and make safe.
It is sad that some members of the public have such little respect for our environment, our people and indeed future generations that they would repeatedly breach the rāhui. We only hope that some deep lessons are learnt from this unfortunate episode.
And she says Te Kauro people have respect for the forest, stating it is not a playground.
When people enter a tapu space for selfish intent and without regard to the tapu and to the well-being of the forest, they may not know it, but they are harming the well-being of the forest, our people, and potentially themselves and their families.
During sentencing, Judge Tremewen reiterated the importance of the bylaw, saying there is an important and legitimate need to warn off others who might seek to enter the prohibited areas, adding that there will be a significant rather than trifling consequence if someone breaches the bylaw. For the three charges, Robert Armistead was fined $5,700, a sum iwi trustee Edward Ashby is content with.
We're comfortable that it's in the thousands, that's sort of big enough to be a deterrent, I think. If it was a few $100s, it might not be enough to make people think twice.
Edward Ashby stressed the importance of following the rules, saying the iwi have worked incredibly hard to protect the forest.
This sort of behaviour just undermines all that work. It undermines us as an iwi, it undermines the environment, and it undermines future generations, not just for us, but the community as well. I mean, that's great if you love going for a bushwalk, but hard to do if you don't have a bush to walk in. So that's what this is all about. So, we think this sends the right signal to the community.
Meanwhile, Auckland Mayor Phil Goff has welcomed the outcome of the case, saying Mr Armistead's offending was a serious and deliberate breach of the bylaw. Edward Ashby says they're happy to put this case behind them, but their work won't stop.
The mahi is continual, but at the end of the day, that's our duty, that's our role, and that's our privilege to, try to protect this ngahere, this forest. And we do it not just for ourselves, but for the forest's sake and actually for our community.
Robert Armistead was also ordered to pay $130 in court costs and says he will not breach the bylaw again. For Checkpoint, Kate Gregan.
Frontline staff working for fashion giant H&M walked off the job this afternoon. The workers from 2 Auckland stores took to the streets accusing the employer of failing to meet its commitment to international labour standards by paying its workers a living wage. Carmina Blewett reports.
H&M workers are on strike today because their company, their employer, won't do the right thing, coming to the table, prepared to pay a living wage.
Demands for change and the blasts of car horns rang out at the end of Auckland's Queen Street as fed up H&M employees voted with their feet. The desire for fairer pay is what brought Commercial Bay and Sylvia Park employees like Angela to walk off the job. After close to 2 years working for the clothing chain, a single pay rise hasn't been enough to reach living wage.
I just feel like H&M has a lot of money to give and the living wage isn't a lot to ask for. And yeah, I just like a pay rise to get the living wage. It's as simple as that.
Another H&M sales advisor, Mac O'Sullivan, is worried about the current wages he and his co-workers earn. He says as things are, many from the team can only just afford to get by.
Right, so currently we are very, very understaffed and we're overworked for what we're getting. So a lot of the time, we're finding our stress levels being very high. So as much as we do love our customer base and we do love working for our role, we're finding that there's a continuous struggle between us and the management. At the moment, a lot of us are just living paycheck to paycheck, and that is on the minimum wage. So rather than just continuing to survive, we want to be able to live.
First Union organiser Natalie Jacks says while H&M have failed to meet their obligations to international labour standards, there's an opportunity for them to put as much care into their people as their image.
H&M presents as an ethical and responsible employer. They have a big campaign around fabrics being, environmentally sustainable, around some of their labour practices and where things are being manufactured, and that needs to translate into the shop floor at the front line. Here's a great opportunity for them to, walk the talk.
The Swedish clothing label was contacted about the strike action, but didn't respond in time. For those fed up workers, the message to H&M is simple.
What do we want? Living wage! When do we want it? Now! What do we want?
As of the 1st of April, the minimum wage is $20 an hour. More than 200 accredited employers pay the living wage, currently $22.10 an hour. That's due to increase to $22.75 in September 2021. Ko Carmina Blewett, TNA.
A little worse for wear after 3 weeks of suspected bush bashing and possum wrestling. 2 missing Dunedin dogs have been found against the odds. The border terriers, Floss and Scruff, had been playing down the back of their Brighton property. The children came home, but the dogs didn't, leaving their litter of 6 little pups without parents. Now, I know you're saying pets go missing all the time, but this went way further than the normal fly-it drop. Owner Rowan Newman pulled out all stops, putting up a spotter plane and a drone, and search and rescue swept nearby bush more than once, but nothing. So you can imagine Rowan's reaction when a neighbour delivered Scruff and Floss home yesterday.
Massive relief. I was in shock when I first found out that they'd been found, and then I was still in a wee bit of disbelief, are they my dogs, Yeah, and then when I saw them, I saw their little faces. It was such a cool thing to see.
Tell me about that. What did they look like when you got to see them for the first time?
I think in the first second I was like, I saw my Floss, the wee girl dog, and to be honest, the first thing that popped, I was like, this isn't my dog, just because her eye was really blind in the eye, that clouded over blue look, and she's just a bag of bones. And she had a really thick coat when she left. And when she's come home yesterday, she's got hardly any coat and just like a top line, like a wee mohawk type thing along her spine. So, and then after that second, when I saw him, she was in the back seat of a man's truck, and Scruff was in the passenger. And once he sort of jumped over to the back seat, once I'd opened the door, and I saw him, and I looked back at her, and it was like, oh, it is her, Yeah.
Oh, did you give them a big cuddle and a snuggle?
I was so shocked, and I just scooped them up, and I said thanks to the guy, to the man who found them, and said I'll be back, and I just rushed them off to the vet because I just knew that they needed vet care straight away. Yeah, so that was just, my next mission. So Scruff's come home today. He went on IVs last night and he's on an antibiotic because of he's got some skin, like little scabs. He's like covered in scabs. So he's on antibiotics for the next 10 days and he's home. He's shattered. He's absolutely shattered. So, and we've lost, she's going to stay in and she sees an eye specialist on Monday, just to check out her eye.
So what the heck have they been up to for all this time, do you reckon?
Bush bashing by the looks of the both of them, fighting with possums. I feel like they were picked up like about 10k away from my house, and that's like using the road, so they would have went in between, which is the forestry. So I feel like they've just been walking, on a little mission basically, and then I think they possibly got lost, and then they've just stayed alive. And I feel like
they're kind of little squirters of dogs, aren't they? Not like they're big. Big beasts.
No, they're definitely like rabbit dogs, or rat dogs, you could call them, And I think they've taken on a possum by the looks of Scruff's face because he's got a couple of scratches all over his face, But they wouldn't touch a sheep or anything,
You went to a lot of effort to find these fellas, right? You had a drone, you had search and rescue, you had a plane.
Yeah.
You must have, I know you were just hoping they'd turn up, but you must have by now have kind of thought to yourself, they're not coming back.
I was still looking yesterday, to be honest. I'd drop the kids off at school and I'd come back the back roads and I'd still call. I hadn't given up hope, no. I wasn't at that point. I think after that wee cold snap we had here in Dunedin on Tuesday, I felt like I went into a wee bit of a grieving state, but I still had that wee bit of panic to make me keep searching, I hadn't given up hope, no. I don't think I would have, to be honest. I don't know where it was going to take me, that journey, but I'm happy it's over. But we're all so happy,
Any plans for any kind of celebration?
They're going to get new beds tonight. We'll probably just have pizza and just lots of quiet time, I reckon, and cuddles and lots of love, I'm sure we'll all sleep together tonight,
And that was Rowan Newman, who's got her 2 terriers back. That's Floss and Scruff after 3 weeks. Bees are well known for producing honey and pollinating flowers, but what about detecting landmines? Researchers in Scotland are seeking new funding for a project trying to establish if they can do just that. The experiments, pioneered after the wars in the former Yugoslavia, could have enormous potential because bees are a low-tech solution available around the world. The BBC's James Shaw has been out finding out more.
The humble bee, maker of honey and now potential saver of lives. The St Andrews University project has spent 4 years working with colleagues in Croatia, where abandoned mines are a lethal legacy of the conflicts of the 1990s. First, a swarm is released in a location where there's suspected to be a minefield. When they return to the colony, they're tested for the presence of explosive vapour particles on their furry bodies. Then, as Dr. Ross Gelanders explains, the bees are trained to be drawn to the smell of explosives by connecting it in their memories with the smell of sugar.
So as the bees fly across the TNT to get to the sugar water, they're associating that smell of TNT with a reward. Therefore, when you let them out after their training, that's when they pardon the pun, but they make a beeline to where they're smelling this vapour plume.
A research team at the University of Zadar in Croatia is experimenting with drones equipped with cameras to track the bees as they locate hidden mines. But with their funding due to run out in September, the scientists in Scotland and Croatia are keen to raise more money to take their project to the next phase, testing it out in real-world situations.
And that is James Shaw reporting, the one from the BBC. Before we go, some feedback about an earlier story we had. Now, this is about a dog. He is a spaniel, and he's potentially going to be trained to detect ovarian cancer, to sniff out ovarian cancer, the early signs of it, because dogs have way more sensitive noses than us, but it's going to cost around $250,000 get him trained up and ready to go. And it was Canine Medical Detection who we were talking talking to about that. Some of you have got in touch. You'd like to donate. So I'm just going to direct you to their website, Canine, as in the letter and the number, caninemd.org.nz, if you want to follow that one up. A lot of you fascinated by that story, saying a canine health unit, what can't these critters do? And if you are keen to check it out, look at their website. Catch you next week.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister says concerns that rent hikes could eventuate following benefit increases in the budget were not supported by evidence. New Zealand On Air says it has implemented clearer processes to support victims after admitting they'd not done enough to support a former staff member involved in a 2017 assault. Samoa is expected to confirm its first woman Prime Minister when its Parliament convenes on Monday. And police are warning of traffic delays in Christchurch following a crash between a truck and a cyclist in Hornby. Those are the headlines. Our next news is at 7.
You never know who you'll meet on Country Life. There are maggot farmers.
Like roadkill's amazing for it, but you definitely get some funny looks when you're walking down the side of the road and you got a possum on one hand and the back of the car up.
And rural mechanics.
We've got an infested car with a couple of rats that have gone in and died.
You can smell them?
Yeah, you can. If you put your head in there, you won't be in there for long.
Come on, rats, you must have been in there somewhere, surely.
Country Life, Friday nights at 9 and Saturday mornings after 7 on RNZ National.
And I can tell you that Country Life tonight, after the news at 9, is going to Flea Bay on Banks Peninsula to visit a farm which is penguin friendly.